Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I want to chat with you guys a little bit about doing training from a dead stop. This is something that I've always believed in. I've always had good results with it. I've always had clients who get good results with this, and that is selecting a lot of our movements to where we do exercises to where we have to come to a complete stop at the bottom. In other words, no bouncing, no stretch reflex. Now, that being said, I don't want to discount the stretch reflex because, as many of you know, stretch reflex, also known as a myotatic reflex, on a lot of exercises can be very, very powerful. It can be very valuable. It can do a lot, right? It can do a lot of things for you in terms of hypertrophy, right? It can do a lot of things, just for development in regard to that. In some cases, it can help with rate of force production for athletes. So a lot of times we like getting a stretch reflex in our squats. We like it on, certain arm exercises and things, right? Incline curls, extensions for your triceps where you can get that stretch reflex. Doing speed work against bands, right? There can be a lot of merit to doing that. But here's one of the things that I like to point out. With most of our exercises, unless an exercise we're doing it because it kind of brings, something special to the table, I would generally like to see most of the exercises that we are doing either be at a dead stop or have a stretch reflex. So in other words, you'll notice that I don't do a lot of touch and go benching. I tend to do pause benching, recommend pause benching, program it, or dumbbell work, McDonald bar work, things to where you can get a stretch reflex out of the bottom. And again, I don't want to discount the value of that stretch reflex because, again, benching with dumbbells is a perfect example. It can hit the muscle fibers in the pectorals in a way that we're not always getting from the barbell, right? Because we can get a deeper stretch on it. There is no terminal stop. We have just that stretch reflex against the muscle to rebound us. It can have profound benefits. When we set that aside and we start looking at dead stop training, I'm a big fan of it. Why? It builds brute strength, right? It builds brute strength. And you guys will see me, routinely do a lot of stuff here and there, even maxing and stuff off of pins, a lot of work directly off the floor. Notice on my benching here, it's paused, right? I'm coming to a stop, and I'm not just, a very brief pause. A lot of these are one count pauses. Some of them are longer, right? Same thing on these pull-ups. I'm coming to the bottom, getting to that stretch and stopping, right? You can't do as many when you do this with a lot of these things. So you'll see that on the pull-ups here, coming to a stop. The rowing, all done off the floor, which incidentally, people usually who've seen me shirtless do pull-ups and stuff in the past shirtless, they're always, surprised that my back is probably my biggest body part. And I've always used training like that for my lats. Everything for my lats I've always done is either a dead stop, like a rowing off the floor, with some exceptions with short phases, or it involves a stretch reflex, right? If we're doing a stretch reflex, it's usually done with dumbbells. I get the most out of that as far as that ability to stretch with a dumbbell on a row. But otherwise, I'm usually rowing off the floor. And I've learned to appreciate and value things like pull-ups, coming all the way to the bottom and just pausing for a minute and then having to pull yourself back up with no momentum. Okay, pulling yourself back up with no momentum when you're over 200 pounds like me is not easy to do when you're doing pull-ups. You start burning out real quick on reps. But the lat activation is phenomenal. I like floor presses. I program a lot of floor presses for clients. I really need to be doing more myself again. I haven't been doing on really this current phase of training. The phase where I'm making this video, I'll probably work on back in. Only because I really want that technical practice on the pause benching. But all the benching is done with the pause. But floor presses, you come to that hard stop. It's not even the soft pause you get on your chest where you can use, the muscle tissue in your chest as a cushion. It's the floor. And if you hit that floor too hard and you don't control it, it hurts. But that's where a lot of this comes in. The pause squatting there, all the deadlifting, deficit deadlifting. I like deficit deadlifts for rep work. Again, forcing us to come to a pause and a dead stop off of an even deeper position. And yes, I do not ever program touch and go deadlifts. There's a reason I broke in, master state records in Texas and have an elite deadlift, in multiple classes. It's a reason I've been able to do that. And it's not, just genetics, because I am not the most genetically gifted person out there. But I don't do touch and go reps. Everything is pulled from a dead stop. Pausing builds brute strength. It builds a high rate of force production. It forces you to have control of weights because you can't bounce and flop and do any of this stuff. When you pause at the bottom of a squat, the bottom of a bench, deadlift off the floor, reset on the floor each rep, row off the floor, floor press, pin presses, pin squatting, pin pulls, whatever you need to do. Right? When we're doing all these things, we have to generate that force instantly from a terminal hard stop. There's no way to use inertia. There's no way to use momentum. It teaches you to recruit muscle fibers faster. You get to those upper threshold units more quickly early on in a movement because you don't have any other way to get the weight started. And a lot of times at the bottom of these movements, they're the most difficult. That's not true in every case. We could argue the pull-ups and stuff, not necessarily. But most of these other movements, the very bottom of the movement is usually where these movements are the most difficult. And it's due to the mechanical tension involved. We're oftentimes put in a position where the muscles are lengthened. Okay, that's usually where our highest rate of mechanical tension is placed upon them. We have no outside force to get the weight moving. We're having to go from a lengthened position of the muscles, usually sometimes several muscles involved, right, on some of these movements, and generate force to get the weight moving. And you start doing this with heavy weights, right? You start doing this with heavy weights, what happens? All right, we get a very, very high rate of muscle fiber, upper threshold muscle fiber recruitment. And we get it very early in a set. We get it early on in a rep because we have to. And again, I feel this sort of training is great for building just straight brute strength. It's a great way to get thick. It's a great way to just put on muscle. It really is. And it has to do with those factors. You don't always get the same pump with a lot of these movements, because of the pausing and everything. Sometimes you don't get the same pump that you might get from other things. But we don't have to chase that pump on everything. If we're getting the high rate of motor unit recruitment that we want, not as big of a deal. We can get pump over time with enough volume. You can do that with your other supplemental work. But for, again, just recruiting muscle fibers, building brute strength, and just good for just getting thick and putting on muscle mass, I love dead stop training. I love it. I use a lot of it. I program a lot of it. But again, like with anything else, remember, it's just one tool in the toolbox. It doesn't mean it's a thing that you should be using exclusively. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.